Hi everybody, it's Mike Kennedy. Welcome back to my garage bar, or maybe to my garage bar for the first time. I did some videos from here last week, sailing the 7 seas of legal ethics, and then a series of shorter videos related to my professional responsibility in legal ethics college tournament style bracket, which is a fun thing, yeah, I agree, and well, for me, and a distraction for me, but I think they're informative. Again, each is only 15 minutes long, and I cram in at least one thought on 16 different rules or concepts associated with professional responsibility and legal ethics. So check it out. Still in the garage because we're still in the middle of the coronavirus public health crisis. Hope everybody's staying safe, staying healthy, being patient and kind to each other. Lawyers, check out my blog. 2 posts in particular. One, professional responsibility in COVID-19, talks about, gives some tips on how to practice during the pandemic, what I consider to be the standard of reasonableness right now. I've also done a post called Civility, It Matters Now More Than Ever, or something like that. I can't remember the headline or title, but basically it points out that civility is always needed in the profession, especially now, and then shares 2 stories, not from Vermont, thankfully, on what not to do during the pandemic. Stance not to take with opposing counsel, something not to file in court. So be good to each other out there. Be accommodating right now. That's my last tip on that. So today, moving to trust accounts. I mentioned last week that I might do some more presentations from the garage. Again, the bar is not open. That would be wrong because it's during a CLE and it's only about 7 a.m. So while it's 5 o'clock somewhere, that somewhere is in Australia or the Philippines. I'm not really sure where, but it's nowhere near right now. So today, just have the coffee to help me get through trust accounting because, well, why am I doing trust accounting from the garage? Well, trust accounting is not my favorite thing to present on. It's nobody's favorite thing to attend, but the garage makes it a little less formal, and maybe to me, I'm thinking it'll be a little less difficult to get through a dry topic, but it's an important topic. I'm going to keep it short, probably just 15, 20 minutes so that I can do later 2 or 3 other short ones to get up near an hour for attorneys. Today's goal is to try to convince people to uncomplicate trust accounting, simplify it. So I have a presentation that I am going to try to share with all of you. We'll see if I have the capability to get that on my screen, and not only get it on my screen, which I've done, but turn it into a slideshow. So there's the title slide, Trust Accounting, Fear Not, Simplify. And here's why I say that. Here's the backdrop. In 2018, I blogged a New Year's resolution for us all, which I entitled, Don't Overcomplicate Trust Accounting. And I did that because we have overcomplicated trust accounting in 2 ways. First, and yesterday I did a talk for a professional responsibility and legal ethics class at the University of Illinois, Chicago, John Marshall School of Law, Professor Bernarbe. Professor, thanks for having me. It was great. And one of the questions that a student asked me was, which rule or rules are most confusing or most complicated? Can't remember exactly what it was. Didn't take me long to answer that it's the trust accounting rules, in my opinion. If you look at them, I don't think they're a model of clarity. Probably should spend some time redrafting them and making some recommended changes, but they're just dense, 5, 6 sentences per rule. That's not a rule. That's not a good way to draft a rule, to have a giant paragraph with commas and semicolons and such. So I think they're complicated just by their very nature. I think also as a profession, we've complicated trust accounting probably unnecessarily. We tend to stick to this sort of preconceived notion that as lawyers, we don't know how to keep the books. And that's not a good approach to take. But we have taken it, and I think we've convinced ourselves that trust accounting is a little more complicated than, hopefully, as I'll show later, it really is. And when we overcomplicate stuff, we fear it. And when we fear stuff, we avoid it. That's just a human phenomenon. And it's a bad idea to avoid trust accounting. Here's a quote. "'Tis foolish to fear what you cannot avoid." Who do you think said that? Before I get to why I'm using it, because it's on a slide, so I must be using it for a reason. Who do you think said that? And here are your choices. Now, don't yell out the choice, because I say that at the live seminars or the live quizzes, because if you yell something out in a competition, another team might hear, so you're not doing your team any good. Nor are you allowed at my live quizzes to yell out a fake answer to try to trick another team. Well, your team is writing down the correct answer, not the one you wrote out. That's not why I'm saying don't yell out the answer. I'm saying don't yell out the answer because it would be really, really weird. Because right now you're sitting probably alone at home or in your office, and you shouldn't be yelling at your device. Anyway, "'Tis foolish to fear what you cannot avoid." Who said it? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Mark Twain, Joan of Arc, or Publilius Syrus? The answer is Publilius Syrus. He was a slave from Syria who went to Rome, earned his freedom, I don't remember how, became a well-known writer and performer around the Roman Empire. And he wrote in one of his publications, "'Tis foolish to fear what you cannot avoid." Sort of an aside here, as I avoid trust accounting for about another minute or so. I promise that'll be it. Publilius Syrus has a connection to the Rolling Stones. That's their logo, which gives him a connection then to this blog, because the most read post in the history of my blog, so 5 years now, is one I did in 2017 arguing that the Stones are a better band than the Beatles, which they are. That generated more feedback, positive, negative, and otherwise, than any other post I've posted in the 5 years since I started the blog, which is sort of a bummer as a blogger who's blogging on legal ethics when my column on the Stones versus the Beatles is the most popular by far in the history of the blog. Anyway, what's his connection to the Stones? Well, he also said, or wrote, "A rolling stone gathers no moss." And as you know, Muddy Waters wrote the song "Rolling Stone," which the Stones took their name from. Okay, no more avoiding trust accounting. Just a little backdrop for you there. So here's some simple thoughts as we try to not fear but simplify. We know from Publilius Syrus that it's foolish to fear what we cannot avoid. We know we cannot avoid trust accounting, so don't be foolish. Don't avoid trust accounting. Here's one reason we can't avoid it. It's everywhere in the rules. Rule 1.5, the rule on reasonable fees, includes a rule that we added a couple years ago that talks about the very limited situations in which lawyers and clients can agree that a lawyer will treat a fee paid in advance as the lawyer's own upon receipt. There's Rule 1.15, the rule on safekeeping client property. Not to be confused with an entirely separate rule, not a paragraph within the rule, but an entirely separate rule, Rule 1.15 capital A, which sets out the features that you must have in your trust accounting system. Then there's Rule 1.15 capital B, again, another separate rule, which is the rule on pooled interest-bearing trust accounts. Those are what most of us refer to as our IOLTA. And finally, there is Rule 1.1, the duty of competence. The comments make it very clear that competence includes acting competently to safeguard client property. And then, of course, there's the disciplinary cases. If you look at Vermont's disciplinary cases over the past, I'd say 15, 20 years, both the cases from the hearing panels, which are our trial courts, and the Vermont Supreme Court, there are many involving trust account violations. And the court, anyhow, has, I think, made it clear that trust account violations will result in sanctions, and including serious sanctions. They're a quick way to run into a licensing issue. So that's why we need to not fear them, simplify them so that lawyers don't violate the rules. Now, I just went through the rules that relate to trust accounting, and there's so many of them, we can't avoid it. I don't think trust accounting is something we've ever been able to avoid. Douglas Hoffman was a lawyer who lived in the early 1800s. He, in 1836, wrote 50 resolutions in regard to professional deportment. And they were 50 ideas, resolutions that he resolved, for lack of a better term, to make, because there is no better term, to make every single year. And those 50 resolutions are widely considered to be the first ever written code of conduct to apply to lawyers. I blogged about the 50 original rules. There's the link. It's November of 2017. Anybody who wants this presentation, let me know and I'll email it to you. Anyway, it's always struck me how many of Hoffman's original 50 resolutions have carried through to today's rules, you know, almost 200 years later. He has resolutions that relate to civility, conflicts of interest, file delivery, diligence, communication, and not just communication, but communicating reasonable expectations to clients, which is something I write about and talk about all the time, and mentoring. He has many more that I just haven't gotten to yet. Those are the 6 I've blogged on. How Hoffman's thoughts on each of those topics carry over into the rules we have today. So why am I talking about Hoffman right now and simplifying trust accounting? Because in his 50 rules, I think he did simplify trust and accounting. So he knew even in 1836 that trust accounting is something that we can't avoid. So let's look at 2 of his resolutions, the 2 that deal with client property and trust accounting. Number 25 is, I will retain no client's funds beyond the period in which I can, with safety and ease, put him in possession of them. 26, I will on no occasion blend with my own my client's money. If kept distinctly as his, it will be less liable to be considered my own. Now, I have my book out here. Well, I get to the next slide. I'm going to get my book so I can quote for you verbatim. But let's look again. There are Hoffman's resolutions. So number 25 on the left, about retaining no client's funds longer than needed to, with safety and ease, put the client in possession of those funds. Here's what rule, sorry, I should have had my book open. 1.15 D says, except as stated otherwise in this rule or permitted by law or by agreement with the client, blah, 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 again, complicated, a lawyer shall promptly deliver to the client or third person any funds or other property that the client or third person is entitled to receive. That's number 25. 26, I will on no occasion blend with my own my client's money. Here's rule 1.15, small a. A lawyer shall hold property of clients or third persons that is in the lawyer's possession in connection with a representation separate from the lawyer's own property. So Hoffman's ideas in 1836, something even he knew we couldn't avoid, or he resolved that we couldn't avoid, have carried through to the rules today. So switching gears a little bit, I'm going to do a pop quiz. It's only 5 questions. You know, it's not going to take forever. Just to sort of give you a chance to measure where you are before we get into the next couple of videos that I'm going to do on trust accounting. Like back in high school, when you move on to a new section in math or whatever, they give you a pop quiz. You ace it, still got to take the whole section. They don't let you pass out. I'm going to do the same. So even if you get 5 for 5, you still got to watch the next couple of videos. But here they are. Question 1. I often speak of the 7 C's of legal ethics. What's the C of legal ethics that relates to trust accounting? It's a one word that begins with the letter C. I mentioned it a couple slides ago. Hoffman mentioned it in his resolutions. What is it? Doesn't actually appear in the rules, but it's there. Obviously, it's really dry air or something, because usually I'm a very talented musician, and that didn't work too well. Next question. Speaking of question 1, do the Vermont rules of professional conduct allow a lawyer to deposit the lawyer's own funds into trust? Is the answer A, no. B, yes, but no more than $50. C, yes, but no more than $500. Or D, yes, but no more than is necessary for the sole purpose of paying service charges or fees on the account. I won't sing this time. Go in silence. like whatever show has no music in the background. Just makes you think. Question 3. By rule, the financial institution where a lawyer or firm maintains a trust account must do what? Is it A, pay no less than 2% interest on the trust account? B, notify disciplinary counsel of checks presented against insufficient funds? C, prohibit ACH transfers to and from trust accounts? Or D, require wet signatures on trust account checks? Wet signature is an actual signature as opposed to a signature stamp. See that stamp? Or an e-signature. Which of those is a bank required to do if it wants to maintain, we have an approved list of financial institutions, and there's one thing a bank has to do to be on that list. What is it? Okay. Question 4. Oops, I went backwards. Question 4. In general, the general rule, and there's an exception that I've already mentioned, but in general, fees paid in advance, A, are the lawyers upon receipt and must not go into trust. B, fees paid in advance must go into trust until earned. C, fees paid in advance must go into an account that will generate interest payable to the client. Or D, fees paid in advance are discouraged. Now, there's a lot of people who are accepting fees paid in advance right now who are shaking. My computer's actually starting to shake. You're shaking so much because you're hoping it really isn't D. But it's not, don't worry. So I just narrowed the choices for you. Fees paid in advance, what's the general rule? And question 5, because you can always hit pause and just look at the screen here. A little bit of a math, no, not a little bit, a math question. And I know we're not great at math. I'm certainly not, but here we go. Lawyer is holding $1,000 of clients and is holding it in connection with their representation, and it's in trust. The matter has ended, and lawyer's bill is $750. Client contends that lawyer earned only $500. So what's lawyer have to do here? Is it leave $1,000 in trust until the dispute is resolved? Is it disperse $500 to lawyer and leave the other $500 in trust until the dispute is resolved? Is it disperse $500 to lawyer, $250 to client, and leave $250 in trust until the dispute is resolved? Or is a lawyer supposed to disperse it all to the client and then seek the fee through any legal method? For instance, fee arbitration or small claims case. So basically, lawyer's got $1,000. Client agrees lawyer earned $500. Lawyer thinks lawyer earned $750. So what happens? And those are your choices. Well, you read through them and do the math. I do have an official mathematician of my blog, my friend Jeff Davis, also a high school basketball coach. No chance he'll ever watch this video, but thanks for being my official mathematician, JD. You're a good guy. Okay, let's move on to the answers. If anybody needs one repeated, I have no way of knowing since this is a recorded presentation, so don't bother raising your hand. Commingling is the 7th C of legal ethics, or one of the 7 C's of legal ethics. Question 2, speaking of commingling, generally prohibited. However, lawyers and firms may put into their trust accounts their own funds, but no more than is necessary for the sole purpose of paying service charges or fees on the account. Remember, we put this rule in about 13 years ago, 14 years ago, because if all you have in there is client funds and you don't have any clients, or you have only a little bit of money on behalf of a client, and the bank starts dinging your account for fees, there's either going to be an overdraft or the bank's going to take the fee from client funds, or both. So we changed the rules to allow lawyers to put their own money into the accounts to cover those fees. We thought about a limit, 500 or 1,000, decided that didn't make sense because for many lawyers and firms, there aren't significant fees or charges to the accounts. So the 500 or 1,000 would essentially serve as a float to protect against an overdraft from ever happening. Question 3, to have a trust account or to be able to maintain trust accounts and get on that list of our approved institutions, the banks must notify disciplinary counsel whenever a trust account check is presented against insufficient funds. And the rule says even if the bank chooses not to honor the check. We don't get involved in the interest rate that the banks pay. For those of you looking to support the Vermont Bar Foundation by having your accounts at banks that pay a decent interest rate, check out the VBA's page, or it might be on the VBF's website, probably both. They have the gold, silver, and bronze level banks, I think is how they've broken it up. ACH transfers, not prohibited right now. I'm going to talk about those in one of the next videos that I do on trust accounting. Quick tip for today, call your bank, ask them about putting a block, an ACH transfer block on your trust account. And we do not require the actual signatures. You can use the signature stamp or an electronic signature. Question 4, general rule, fees must go into trust until earned. I did mention earlier the limited situation in which a fee can be treated as earned upon receipt. I'm going to talk about that in one of my next seminars, but for now, if not, it goes into trust until it's earned. And then finally, the math question, the answer there is C, and here's how that plays out. Even client agrees that lawyer earned 500. So if lawyer leaves that 500 in there, that would be commingling. So lawyer has to get that out. Even lawyer agrees that at most lawyer earns 750. So that leaves 250 that even lawyer says isn't lawyers. That's got to go to the client. Then lawyer leaves the $250 that's in dispute in trust until the dispute is resolved. In one of the seminars I intend to do to follow up to this one, I will talk about the types of claims against funds that trigger the duty to leave those funds in trust until the dispute is resolved. So where's that leave us? Again, don't fear trust accounting. We avoid what we fear, and that's foolish because we can't avoid trust accounting, at least foolish in this instance. Action cures fear. What's a simple act we can take to cure the fear of trust accounting? There's a clue in the question. A simple act, and it goes back to the title of this presentation, is to try to simplify it. Now, this might be an oversimplification. If you want to tell me that it is, I won't disagree with you. But I'll tell you this, if you can keep these 4 tips in mind, you will go a long way towards complying with the trust accounting rules. If it's not your money, it goes in trust. If it is your money, get it out of trust. At all times, know how much you have and whose it is. You know, remember, they're called pooled interest-bearing trust accounts. So it's not good enough just to put all the money from all your different clients in there and say, well, the total's correct. No, you have to know not only how much you have, but how much belongs to Mike, how much belongs to client A, client B, client C, on down the line. Then promptly pay yourself, promptly pay your clients. I should have added one more. I'm not sure why it's not on the screen, but don't disperse without good funds. We're going to talk about that in another seminar too. But keep those simple things in mind, and they'll go a long way towards helping you comply with the rules. Simplify trust accounting. Don't fear it. That's the end of this segment. I hope it went well. I'm trying to do a new thing. So I open my phone here to hopefully get it right, where I do a pop culture icon of the segment. Any guesses for this segment? We've talked about simplifying trust accounting, not fearing it. When you simplify means to make something simpler in our minds. Does that give any hints? Simple minds. Breakfast Club, don't you forget about me. And don't you forget about those parentheses around forget about me. Anyway, by the way, for you younger folks, this song is a great song. It did not come from Pitch Perfect. It came from The Breakfast Club, an 80s movie. Thank you all for watching. Again, I'll be back with a couple more trust account videos later. Stay safe, stay healthy, and thanks again. Bye-bye.